town of Hillsborough is insignificant, may seem insignificant in the global picture. Why is it so important to chronicle the history of this town?
Well, I think it's always important to chronicle history. In fact, if my wife were with me today, she would be a staunch supporter of that. She spent 20 years, the first 20 years of her working life in education, where she was a history teacher. In fact, at Immaculata High School, where she taught for a number of years, she taught history to seniors, civics to seniors, and then became the head of the history department and then the director of guidance and counseling until she went into the private sector. So she is one that's always impressed upon us, us being myself and my two sons, the importance of history. Unless we know history and study history and follow history, we might make the same mistakes that we've made during our history. So it's important that we chronicle that. It's also important, my ethnic background is Italian. My grandfather was born in Italy, didn't speak much English, and one of the regrets that I had is that I didn't spend more time as a young man sitting with him and picking his brain about what it was like to make the transition from another country into the United States. I know it was an adjustment, and my heart goes out to any immigrant who doesn't handle the English language very well when they get here, because it can be a real impediment to becoming involved in the community and things like that. But I just think it's very important to chronicle that because of situations like that. I think over the past 15 or 20 years, the American population has become very tuned into the genealogy, learning more about our ancestors, where we came from, and things like that. And without it being chronicled and documented someplace in history, it's very difficult to put together. We tried tracing our roots back to Italy and found out there were very few written records that are available in Europe, and I'm sure in some of the other cultures throughout the world, the same thing is true. So that's the reason I feel it's important to document history. So our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren will have the benefit of that readily available to them and written in a first-hand knowledge, as opposed to being interpreted by scholars who think this is what happened at that time based on their investigations. So.
What do you find significant or interesting about this town? Are there any unique historical details that you know?
So my favorite historical event of all time has to do with the Sutherland Mountain Preserve, and has to do with General George Washington. And we have a picture of Washington up there because when I was mayor, I made sure we put a picture in here because I thought it was such a cool event. So General Washington, after the Battle of Princeton, his troops went up to the top of the Sutherland Mountain Preserve. That's where they were camped out, sort of to make sure, it was a good passageway between leaving that battle and on his way out to Morristown. But came through Hillsborough. You're at the top of the hill there, and you can look down and see the Hessian troops and the British troops down in New Brunswick. So there, you see those troops there. What our troops did, the Revolutionary troops, they put corn stalks in diagonal pieces like this. So they did that because the corn stalks from far away, they look like guns. So they put all these different guns like that. So all the troops down in New Brunswick, the British troops, could look up. They saw all of these guns, and they said, "Oh my gosh, it looks like the revolutionaries got reinforcements. We should just keep going to New Brunswick and just keep going out and not engage them again in the battle." So they did that. So basically, Washington was able to trick the British to just not engage them in a battle in a town like Hillsborough and to keep going, so that way they could escape and end up going up to Morristown so they could camp for the winter. So I love that story. I think it's so cool. It's just a neat little piece of Hillsborough history that most people don't know about.
Yeah, many people don't know about Hillsborough history because it may seem as an insignificant town in the larger picture of things, but I think it's important to explore the history of our town, even though it may not be significant on the global scale.
Yeah, there's so many neat little facts like that. I mean, I could go on. The amount of Hillsborough troops that fought in the Revolutionary War was astounding. They basically would call up farmers, that's what they were, it was farmers fighting the Revolution, to go to Millstone, which was the county seat at the time, and for a very brief period it was also the national seat. I think the Continental Congress, or a version of it, maybe it was the second one, met in Millstone too. So there was these amazing battles that happened there with a lot of troops that were directly from Hillsborough that captured a couple British people, including, I think it was General Simcoe. You had to look that one up, but we captured some individuals that were just ravaging the countryside and just taking products from some of the farmers around here, and it was troops from Hillsborough that ended up capturing this really bad guy. So it was neat, and I think we depicted on our flag too. You see some of the revolutionary stuff there, where you have the old homesteads where we used to keep the farms when we were founded in 1771. So scales of justice, and then of course we have technology. I can go into that later too, but a lot of neat stuff about Hillsborough. A lot of neat stuff if you take the time to learn.